You've been away working on the case of Reverend Pinkney, and we've had a lot of people mobilize from our group on this issue. And so to recap, for anyone who was not aware, he was sentenced to 2.5 to 10 years for the alleged crime of changing dates on 5 petitions during a campaign to recall the mayor of Benton Harbor. This is actually a misdemeanor in Michigan, but he's been sentenced to 5 felony counts. This case is being contested for a number of different reasons. We are all convinced that it's going to turn out that Pinkney was framed and basically railroaded to get him out of the political struggle in Benton Harbor and to continue the emergency manager project. But we'll see how this all shakes out. But he does need your continued help, especially donations for the appeal fund. Expenses are piling up, things like needing a court transcript, in addition to starting to put together a fund to hire an appeal attorney. To read more about the case, visit our website we helped put together at freepinkney.wordpress.com. That's got some information. Or you can visit Reverend Pinkney at bhbanco.org. That's bhbanco.org, and donate to his appeal fund.
So for tonight, we're going to air an episode that we taped before Christmas. Once again, Merry Christmas.
We've been talking about doing another show on the occult, which begs the question... Which begs the question, what the hell are we doing? Shouldn't we be talking about economics and getting into current affairs? And I think, there's 2 answers to the question. One is, it takes you into areas that a lot of people want to know. When you see the Bohemian Grove, when you see a lot of occult symbolism in popular culture or in corporate logos or whatever, that kind of stuff, people just want to know what is going on with all this stuff. Why is it all there? For me, I've been thinking about this a lot. I think the other side of the equation is, right now, with things being so tenuous in the economy, we are heading into a territory where a lot of people have forgotten some very basic things about what civilization is, what the alternative to civilization looks like.
People are almost begging for no civilization, for a return to primitive culture.
And that would be either, with the libertarians or with the kind of people that came out of Occupy, like this whole after-party movement where they're talking about the world being run by urban gardens and all this stuff.
When people come up with that theory, they say that the libertarians, if you go all the way to both ends of the spectrum, all the way around the circle, they meet. The libertarians, let's say in the far left, meet in certain places. Well, that's where they meet, ending civilization.
And the other thing is, like, all the revolutionary memes in the popular culture, where we were talking about with Ferguson. Why is it that, there are all of a sudden, like, Planet of the Apes movies coming out? Why are the Hunger Games movies coming out right now? Zombie movies, all this stuff like White House Down. It seems like
Does Hollywood reflect the culture, or does Hollywood dictate the culture?
And it's a good question. How do they define the dystopia? And it always kind of comes down to, the Hunger Games is a good example where it's just like this scientific tyranny. The Hunger Games kind of seems like if the CIA listened to Alex Jones and then said, all right, let's create a movie to really rile up Alex Jones listeners and get them to want to be anti-government revolutionaries, they would create the Hunger Games.
And the flip side is you don't see any movies where you have a high standard of living. You see people struggling for survival, scratching in the dirt. It's like Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Mm-hmm. And is that what life is like? This is my biggest concern in the world. Nobody is oriented toward what a standard of living really is.
And the message of 1984 is, history is a boot stomping on a human face forever. I like some things about Orwell, but I just have to wonder, okay, he was a friend of Huxley. They both went to Eton together. He was in British intelligence. Is 1984 somehow a propaganda book to rile up fear? What follows 1984, a right-wing reaction in the United States that lasts until the present. Back to the Hunger Games.
I was speaking to somebody you'd think was part of the system recently, was a high-powered DC lawyer, and he took his 10-year-old son to go see the Hunger Games. And I said, don't you think that's a little much for a 10-year-old? And he said, I'm preparing him. By the time he grows up, he's going to live in that type of society, and I'm preparing him now. It's part of the mainstream.
In Greco-Roman society, this idea of like organizing society around cults. What is the purpose of human sacrifice in ancient times? It gets you to some interesting questions about what is the political purpose of this kind of like the extreme of what humans can do to each other, and sort of what's the alternative to that? You know, how did civilization develop, modern republican government and things like that develop as a reaction to savage civilization, or, you know, pre-civilization? What is the point of organizing society around human sacrifice? This is how society used to be organized. A lot of atheists today would say that Christianity was somehow just this imposition on the world, that, oh God, now we're superstitious. Well, what was before Christianity? You look in ancient Canaan or Carthage or Babylon or a lot of places like this, and the entire society revolved around infant sacrifice, just mass bloodletting rituals. Look at the ancient, Aztec civilization, and just consider that is what people were doing before the influence of Christianity and in a larger sense, I think, Greek philosophy.
Humans, look what we do now. You know what I mean? We're killing people all over the world.
But if you read, like, the Bhagavad Gita, it becomes painfully obvious that Hinduism is a conspiracy of religion for the purpose of political control and population control. So that you over here are going to be the guy that smokes rats out of a hole for a living. You're going to be the guy that takes dead bodies to the river. And I'm going to be the king. Because, whatever, some blue guy with a flaming sword said so. In differing degrees, you can see how that functions in folklore, in mythology, in religious systems. This idea of the gods, or this idea of the supernatural, as sort of like, why would you need to be making human sacrifices on a pyramid for the purpose of, like, ensuring, the harvest or ensuring the rainfall or whatever? You and I think, sort of butt heads on this issue a little bit, because I want to, like, overly rationalize it, whereas you're willing to take in more information that, people will get from everything from mystical experience to acid trips to whatever, to try to bring in this factor of, like, the hidden dimensions or the hidden rulers of the world.
We said when we started this show that we were going to take all information that was out there and not shun any of it. My grandfather, who was like one of these high-level Mason types, who worked at the United Nations, and when I asked him, tell me all the secrets of the world, he said, well, it's too much studying, it's too much reading, it's a waste of time for me to tell you anything, but I'll just tell you this one thing. You're conscious when the big secret is basically you don't die. You're totally conscious, just like we are right now. And on the other side, depending on how many good works you've done, whatever constitutes good works. And that's a really tricky subject, because when you get into Masons and stuff, they believe in yin and yang and keeping dark and light, so that the planet can be a realm for experience, and that this planet is a place for us to evolve our souls via experience and our karma. And so basically, the more good works you do, the more opportunity to do good works will come to you. It's like this whole thing about good works, and it's intertwined with what the Masons believe when they go out. I mean, a lot of them do charity work.
Yeah.
That's guys that this whole thing's under, the Shriners and the this and the Rotary Club and the Masons. It's all this idea that you're going out and doing charity work, right? You're doing good work. And they would say your karma grows the more opportunities are presented to you to do good works, and that you take on the good works and you complete the task. But you can't do good works if you're in a vacuum. There has to be yin and yang in the planet, right, to provide the opportunity for good works. Supposedly, you don't die, and then the more good works you got to do, it's almost like you get more chips. Like you get more points. You have more options after you die of how you want to reincarnate.
Mm-hmm.
And better options, maybe. At least you have more choice.
In the Gospels, when Christ is crucified, he said, "It is finished." And I take that to mean all of this craziness of, when in the Golden Bough, he gets into this, and one of the important ideas of pagan religion is sacrifice and substitution. Why would somebody, back then it would have been like the Canaanite or the Babylonian religion, why did they need a temple to slit a goat's throat and bleed it out? It's this idea of substitution, where basically you, the individual, do not atone for your sins in this world. You pass them on to a substitute victim, which would be a chicken or a goat, or in the worst cases, a human being, if you're talking about some of these ancient pagan religions. And basically you're going to offer that victim up to these, these evil gods, or these, whatever it is.
We were talking about this the other day, and you were saying that the symbol of Christ being a sacrifice was to end all this craziness of them going around sacrificing everything. It was like, okay, here, your God is a sacrifice, it's over.
Yep.
Christ is sacrificed, so you don't need to go around sacrificing everything you can get your hands on.
Why was Christ a suffering or a self-sacrificing Messiah? I think it's, in a political sense, it is to replace the cult of actual sacrifice with a cult where there is no, where sacrifice now becomes a matter of personal sacrifice of material pleasure in service of the greater good.
It was a transition from barbarism to civilization.
The Romans would go to Carthage and were just horrified. They couldn't believe that there was an entire civilization based on this kind of stuff. So it's not that the entire world was...
It's the big transition from barbarism to civilization, because what you're saying is stop using a surrogate. Here's the sacrifice. Instead, now you have to give up some of your worldly pleasure in order to keep civilization going. You've got to take some personal responsibility. So that's the big transition to civilization. And we're all about forwarding civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm Christian.
Yeah. Well, I have my own personal beliefs about the theological parts of it, but it's an important political change for the world, and it's why the cross? It's the crux of human history, literally. It's a crossroads. It's a turning point.
With all this, the far left, far right, the federal government's the enemy, civilization's the enemy, to sustaining themselves locally, which means that the world won't be able to feed itself.
You might do well in an anarchistic, work environment, meaning you don't need to be given direction and that kind of thing. But if you're talking about actual anarchy, if there's no grocery store tomorrow, do you know how to feed yourself? I mean, I don't know how many people really do.
They're living on top of civilization saying this. Do they really know what barbarism looks like?
Yeah, real anarchy is what you would see in, Liberia or something, which is kids with Ninja Turtle shirts and AK-47s on PCP shooting people and getting rounded up into refugee camps. This Fraser, the guy who wrote The Golden Bough, calls them rude civilizations, but meaning it in an era where you would have had, Diana worship or ritual fight. It's this book, The Golden Bough. It's kind of interesting. It's all based around there's a forest, and this guy has the title The King of the Forest. Diana is always associated with forests and groves and whatever, and so he protects this lake that is supposed to represent Diana, and he's symbolically married to a tree that represents Diana. He has to guard this tree, but and this comes from in Greek mythology, the hero Aeneas was the first person to do this, but then this was an actual cultural phenomenon. But he had to if he was able, if a slave, a fugitive slave, was able to capture a golden bough off of this tree, then he won the right to fight the king of the forest to the death. And if he won, then he became the new king of the forest. It's just this bizarre ritual, and it's kind of the first, gladiatorial combat, releasing public pressure through ritual sacrifice of a king. And you can see it people have done studies on how even the JFK assassination relates to this kind of stuff.
It's a ritual sacrifice, basically.
It was a ritual killing of the king sacrifice that relates all the way back to these pagan ceremonial cultures. Even that kind of a culture, that's a step up from pure anarchy. That's a step up from cavemen smashing each other with rocks. Because at least, even though it's cruel and arbitrary and whatever, at least there's an organization to the culture. There are some rules and there's some hierarchy. But that's still not enough, and then we get Greek philosophy, we get Roman systems of government, the republican government system, this idea that you're entitled to representation and this kind of stuff. And I guess I would just say that, like, history until now has been this just bloody struggle for mythologies that enshrine human rights and enshrine the right of people to, the pursuit of happiness and all that. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It took a long time to get there.
That's a super big point. Bloody struggle to enshrine human rights.
Yep, and people are fighting to go all the way back to something that you can read about in history books and see exactly what it's like, but because we are given the Hunger Games as opposed to like a sober academic study of what a revolution is really like.
Mm-hmm. Because everybody's so sick of working in and off in these awful jobs that have been handed to our generation. So everybody just wants to escape to a cheap piece of land, or, everybody's trying to get free of these service jobs or these, but this, like, everybody's just so, like, wanting to go back to the farm that it's become like this romantic thing. I don't want to have to do that. Like, yeah, there can be a choice that you want to do that as a gentleman farmer on the weekends. But what is this idea that we all want to live, like, locally and
well, and not to mention, it's pretty goddamn insulting to suppose that you, the urban information worker, can go make a farm function when there are these guys, the entire Midwest is full of people who come from generations and generations of farmers that cannot make a living because there are no price supports. Farm prices are completely unregulated. You've got these guys with literally farmers out there with 70 years of experience that know everything about what they're doing and still, are losing the farm. Yet, you, the guy at the advertising agency, is going to make a go at it. This is why most farms in America are hobby farms. They're totally non-economical. And I'm, it's just kind of this idea of like, yeah, man, I'm going to go grow some kale or whatever.
No, that's fine. Go grow some kale, but they're organizing society. They're organizing our society around this crap.
And then just go outside and look around. Where did the bricks come from for your buildings? Where did the glass come from? Where does the electrical wiring come from? People have no idea how interdependent everything is. I've been sort of down the last couple of weeks thinking about this kind of stuff and thinking about, like, just more and more you find out that the only things that are functioning right now are philanthropy and social media boondoggles.
What do you mean philanthropy? Like these big Wall Street funded foundations?
Yep, foundations and just fundraising campaigns for different things. There are rich people who don't know what to do with their money, and there are a lot of people whose job is to organize and try to...
Rich Wall Street people.
Rich financiers. Mm-hmm. And everybody else has to organize their efforts to try to beg some of that money off the financiers. That's real. I mean, that's a real thing. That's what foundations are. That's what. Anytime you're working in academia or something, they're having trouble getting students, and so it's like, well, we got to build our endowment by going out and begging money, basically. It's culture creation as opposed to art, or as opposed to as part of a scientific process. Well,
that's the same thing, obviously, with revolutionary activity or activism. It's all style and no substance. Look at Occupy.
Mm-hmm.
When you say to the people, here's a program, that their wires get crossed. They're like, where's the big graphic meme that has 3 words on it that I can press like? What do you mean a program? Like, what do you mean discipline?
The bull is Wall Street stealing your money. The cape is fashion and entertainment and merchandising. And, so we're living in this world of just one dimension and superficiality and whatever. But the elite are going off of a playbook that goes all the way back to Babylon and Egypt and Rome. And And by elite, I don't, that's a hard...
A person can be called crazy and ignored, or a conspiracy theorist, or this, but the elite are allowed to dive into any subject they want. There's no shame in sitting around with a bunch of elitists and talking about any idea, or they study the occult. But yet we're crazy but they get to sit around and study it.
These elitists, if you mean the kind of people that end up being the Dr. Strangeloves of the world, like an Aldous Huxley or something like that. I think the point is not these people know a bunch of arcane information. It's that these people know how to play chess, and you don't know how to play checkers.
There you go. We have to make a whole apology and feel like, should we be able to talk about this stuff? They make whole institutions based around studying that kind of stuff. I'm sick of the double standard. They get to make brick and mortar institutions to study all this weird stuff. Mm-hmm. And we have to feel like we might be considered crazy.
Yeah, I mean, why the quote unquote elite of the world, who are Rhodes Scholars, or they're in Skull and Bones, or they're in all these things, they are in mystical occult orders that study human history. And we just said before, the salient point is that they understand the principles. They study Aristotle so they can learn how to lie to you. They study whatever. They understand civics in terms of its operating principles, and not just there are 9 justices on the Supreme Court,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they know how to proceed, as Plato says, proceed from the concept.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not proceeding from any concept. We're just going around studying all these little dots that we don't know how to connect. They go to these institutions to learn how to connect the dots. They go into these brick and mortar buildings, whether it's Freemasonry or all their other occult schools, OTO, whatever their miasma of fun is, their Scientology, whatever the hell it is. It's like taking comparative religion classes. They're sitting and they're studying and they're learning how to connect dots. And the rest of us are all out so used to losing. All the ads and stuff on all these articles I read online, your mind gets pulled over. For instance, on my screen right now, because I was reading an article, a Reuters article that Chris got me, and it said 26 sexiest NFL wags.
What is a wag, by the way?
I don't know what a wag is.
I think it might be girlfriend.
And I click on it, and I just felt like that was the stench of defeat.
Yeah, I don't... It's weird that you should say this.
And I felt defeated by the fact that I had clicked on it, because I said, I'm not disciplined and the elite are disciplined. It reminded me then of this quote from Donald Rumsfeld when somebody asked him what movies he likes, and he says, I don't watch movies, I read history books.
Huh.
That quote rings out when I find myself pulled towards this crap. I want to win, and I want to train myself to win.
Yeah, it's funny that you should bring up that thing about writers the left-wing websites. I think maybe the 2 biggest are probably Huffington Post and Salon. But okay, so I'm on Salon, and what are the articles? This is not a movie about being a feminist. Robert Plant unloads in an exclusive. The Sony email leaks. There's some other stuff there that's actual economic stuff, but it's a lot of... It's basically a merging of politics and TMZ celebrity culture.
Right, and the elite are insulated.
Featured article at Salon. Not the fact that there's over 10% unemployment, but why Beyonce and Nicki Minaj had 2014's best celebrity friendship.
But it's what we've said in every episode. The elite create mythologies. The difference between us and the elite is they know mythologies are mythologies. They're insulated, and we're stuck getting our information from people we really shouldn't even be getting our information from.
I know that Santa Claus is a mythology, but I'll go ahead and let my kids believe in it for a while because it helps influence their behavior in a certain way, You
just laughed like it was a silly aside what you brought up. That was really important what you just said. You said you know that Santa Claus is a mythology, but you let your kids believe in it to influence their behavior. That's what they're doing. The elite know that certain things are mythologies, but they let us believe them in order to influence our behavior.
Either they think that anyone worthy of knowing what's going on is going to rise up and figure out what's going on, and everyone else deserves to be led around the nose like sheep,
Yeah. The only weapon you have to cut through this whole system is a program. You can get distracted by a million things, but as long as your core is disciplined to stick to a program that somebody else has figured out, has worked throughout history, because Lincoln used it, Kennedy used it, FDR used it. You stay disciplined to a program that has historically worked, meaning the elite study history and they follow legacies, whether it's their family's legacy or the legacy of history. They are disciplined to follow what works. And we're not. We're just all scattered all over the place. Like, every anarchist that I ever meet thinks that they're the first one that ever came up with anarchy. Every libertarian I meet thinks it's some novel idea. If you don't know what's true, follow a program that's worked.
If studying Plato and Machiavelli were as popular as studying like flavors of craft beer or something like that, we'd be in really good shape. I would love to have 100 million people who were highly educated and understood history, but the fact is that we've got like 10 of those people. If you can at least proceed from basic common sense, it doesn't take a genius to figure out when you have free trade, your jobs go to Mexico. When you have a tariff, your jobs stay in America. That's really all you need to know to want to demand a tariff.
It doesn't take a genius, but people don't even know what free trade is. I mean, really, you don't even know what you're dealing with. Like, you say to free trade, I'm not saying I'm the one, but I'm the one on the streets, handing out these flyers like Chris and, candidates and some other people. I'm telling you that when you say protective tariff, they don't know what that is. When you talk about free trade, they don't know what free trade is. We have to do the most basic education, then it'll be common sense. You can't say protective trade tariff.
And it's just amazing. It's could not be.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to depress you or hurt you. I'm just saying.
No, that one frustrates me. I can understand why it does take a little education to sort of understand how a national bank functions, and it takes an individual to want to go and say like, okay, well, how does bond financing work? And then you can look at that and then say, oh, right, get rid of the interest. It's cheaper, and I can understand how this credit is justifiable just based on the fact that it's being used for production. But like, there's a little bit of a learning curve that goes into that one, or even like the Wall Street sales tax. It's kind of like, I can see how that might raise somebody's hackles, and it doesn't take too long. But the tariff is just, that's the basis of the original Republican Party. Basically, is protect yourself from cheap foreign labor. That's it. How could somebody not understand that? It's like, well, the jobs are all gone. The jobs are all gone because there's no penalty for letting people in Bangladesh do your job.
People don't know what the word means. They don't know that it's a tax that's paid by people who import goods into our country. They don't know that. At the border, when you have a product from another country, we impose a 15% tax if it's made in another country to protect American workers. That's what a tariff means. So basically, you'd have to say to people,
tax imports.
Tax imports. Yeah, we've talked about this before, but we're going to have to come up with a couple of, points like that for each program point so that it helps the people on the ground to even explain that.
It's just amazing, though, how, like, mythology overrides reason in all these areas where, like, we keep picking on Alex Jones. You could take someone like him, though, even, and he's, to be fair, is very educated about a lot of this kind of stuff. And you could say, all right, Alex, do you support free trade? Oh, yes, I support free trade. Everything's got to be free in the free market. Okay, Alex, do you think that we should be able to import goods made by low-wage workers in India without any kind of penalty? Of course not. I support American workers. People cannot sort of hold fast to any kind of a reasonable point of view that conflicts with their mythology.
I've had this discussion countless times with free trade Alex Jones listeners on the ground. They'll say, well, one thing I don't like in your platform is I can see why Wall Street should pay a tax if we have to pay a sales tax. I'm okay with sales tax, not okay with income tax. But they'll say, I don't like this tariff thing. Why do we have to have the tariff thing? And I explain it to them exactly like you explained it. Do you think that we should import goods from low-wage workers in foreign countries and ship our jobs? And that's the reason our jobs have been shipped overseas. And as soon as you say our jobs have been like, their brains just like go, bzz, rewires it in a second, and they go, no. And then you go, so then you are for a protective tariff. And then they go, oh, yeah. They've gotten a libertarian mythology.
They've been hearing from Rush Limbaugh and Alex Jones, crony capitalism, crony capitalism.
Alex Jones always says on his radio show, I don't know why they haven't killed me yet. It's amazing. He talks to the people who are the men who are out of work that should have the jobs that have been shipped overseas and keep saying free trade. It's almost like a joke. We've lost our jobs in this country because they've been shipped overseas because we don't have a tariff. And Alex Jones teaches these men through mythologies and his machismo and his charisma and his mythologies where he's like, I'm a real American. I'm a real American. It's like, what if I took a picture of myself in an American flag bikini holding a gun? And
we would have a lot more listeners, for one thing.
Then everybody would be like, yeah, she's a real American girl. Free trade is not American. You're fighting against these people who spread mythologies.
But it's got the word free in it.
Then do you pander? That's it. From now on, I'm doing this show in an American flag bikini.
We could you could say anything. I'm doing this show from the surface of the moon. I'm just saying. It's a radio show, so no one can know.
Right.
It's like the language has been taken from us, and it's right back to mythology and right back to, a lot of people have put a lot of good work into the study of propaganda and the study of military intelligence turned into the advertising industry. Like the wartime intelligence agencies like the OSS and stuff came back and founded all of our ad agencies. They founded all of our... there are people who are paid strategists of the Republican Party.
Cultural populism.
They do a focus study, and they figure out what resonates with people. They test it. They do, split testing to find out, get all their variables straight. I like that guy. It's all very calculated.
I get this question all the time. People want to know, do I have any special information that Alex Jones is a disinformation agent or CIA or a paid shill or whatever? I don't know. But if he's giving you the wrong information, but you've got to realize you're getting fed bad information. You're getting fed un-American Austrian economics. What you should be looking for is the American School of Political Economy, and Alex Jones is feeding you bad information. So he's feeding you propaganda. So you're getting just as bad information as you'd get from him as you would from Rachel Maddow or Glenn Beck or Sean Hannity, Jon Stewart. You're getting bad information.
I doubt that he is like an agent of any intelligence operation. He's, as you said, he functions as an asset.
He functions as an asset, and that's what people need to know. The same way, do we know that Russell Brand isn't just dating a Rothschild or whatever? We can go into it. That's not the point. The point is, he's an asset.
He fails some very important litmus tests, and if he ever does grab onto a third rail, like, nationalizing the Fed or something like that, he's going to all of a sudden not be invited back to Morning Joe and find out that he doesn't have a concert tour, and,
He's a green activist who thinks he knows everything. He has the wrong advisors. Lincoln would consider Ron Paul an enemy of the state. Any of our great, they go on and on about the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers were trying to build something. What Ron Paul's platform does is take what's left of America and tear it down even more.
He's very similar to Andrew Jackson. A lot of people who are in the Fed movement or whatever will look up to Andrew Jackson and say, he killed the bank, as proof that he was some kind of a great guy. Jackson's two main advisors were Aaron Burr, founder of the Chase Manhattan Banking Company, assassin of Alexander Hamilton, traitor to the United States who tried to sell Louisiana to the British, and Jeremy Bentham, who was, a famous, not only economist, quote-unquote, but a British intelligence officer. I think he was basically the head of British foreign intelligence, if I'm not mistaken. And this was a really, this is a guy who wrote books with names like In Defense of Usury, In Defense of Pederasty, like an extreme, to the verge of being overtly satanic libertarian forefather. He was in regular correspondence with Andrew Jackson, giving him advice on what he should do about the bank or what he should do about this, that, and the other. And so Andrew Jackson, the hero of the libertarians, his main accomplishments were to basically shut down the development of rural America, meaning kill a bunch of bills. He killed a bill to put dirt postal roads to the South, to basically like cut off access from the post office, which was really sort of coming on the scene at that time. He got rid of the Second Bank of the United States in favor of basically a system of like competing currencies. You know, a lot of people want this idea of like, we need to have like currency competition. Well, he did that, and what it was banks were able to issue their own currencies. It caused a speculative panic, a total like hyperinflationary blowout, 30 to 40 years of deep, deep depression that didn't end until the Civil War.
He's a traitor. He's a dirty, dirty British agent traitor. And you know what? We should make a meme. I'm sick of dancing around Ron Paul. He's a traitor to the American system.
Yeah.
He's for free trade. That's why all our jobs are getting sucked overseas.
Yep.
And people hate the post office.
They all hate the post office. Well, the post office is like the most basic example of like a government service, and they want to shut it. They want to shut that down.
We've shut down the post office since the founding of the country.
Jesus Christ! Can I just get some mail?
Weird Austrian free trade. Not that there's not a lot of other dirty, dirty traders. Don't worry, they're all to the left too.
And well. Yeah, and some people would say, like, why would you attack Ron Paul? Because he's good on, like, anti-war kind of stuff. And, that's true as far as it goes. But it's almost, he's more insidious because, like, nobody is going to build, like, a mass movement around Mitch McConnell or something.
Yeah, that's how he gets you. Like, he's got to have a hook. But he voted for the Iraq War. He voted for the Iraq War. His whole hook is that he's anti-war. So he's good on foreign policy. He's non-interventionist. Okay. But then he wants to ship all your jobs overseas.
And he would say, I don't want to take their jobs overseas. I want to let the market determine what happens. Well, yeah, we already figured that out, buddy. Sorry. The market...
You can't compete with Bangladesh.
Yeah, the market determined that people are going to buy cheap stuff, and the more cheap stuff they buy, the more jobs get lost, and the more they need to buy cheap stuff because they don't have any money. And it's just a vicious cycle that goes, on and on until everybody is unemployed. I'm sure Ron Paul is a nice guy to go fishing with or something, but it's just...
Ron Paul's no, because Ron Paul's not a nice guy to go fishing with. Because if you're fishing with him, he would start talking. People have to get more serious about the program and stop focusing on the surface of things and stick to the program. He wouldn't be a nice guy to go fishing with because he'd start talking to you about the free market. And you'd have a bad fishing trip if you knew any better.
I'm just trying to jig for some bass here, and this guy won't stop talking about gold.
It's like, why did people start being pissed off at Alex Jones and libertarians when they lost their savings on silver and gold? What about those people?
Yeah.
Aren't they angry? I don't care. I don't know. Maybe they're just saying, well, it's going to go back up, which it might.
I wish somebody would do some research, and nobody's going to do it because they're all on that same team. All these people like Zero Hedge and stuff. Like, did Peter Schiff somehow short gold and silver stocks at a certain time that made him some money, contrary to his own advice? That would be interesting. It's for people that have eyes to see, you can kind of see that basically the whole society is being played for a bunch of fools and being indoctrinated in anarchism and sort of, we talked about like millennialism in other episodes, just basically this idea that the world is coming to an end. There's no hope. Get ready to go out and survive in the jungle.
Buy end time supplies. That's cult thinking.
Yeah.
That's the way cults operate. They tell you that they have some inside information that everybody else doesn't have, that the world's going to end, and then the world doesn't end. Stuck with some cheap crap you bought from them.
Yeah. Meanwhile, we've spent since, it's 2014, so that means we've spent 13 years getting ready for the end of the world when we could have been building up a political movement to retake Congress. And you can see in other countries, look at, people have mixed feelings about Russia or China or whatever, but look, in a relatively short amount of time, how big of a change you can have just by having good leadership. The
thing that gives me hope is that when you see big changes by good leaders.
I mean, God, look at the United States between the the 20s had some. The start of the 20s were all right, but the difference between like Woodrow Wilson and Calvin Coolidge and these kind of guys to Roosevelt, it's a revolution. From Eisenhower and Truman and whatever to Kennedy is a revolution. It really doesn't take that much. The problem is that we don't have any pieces in place. There is, we talk about this idea of we got to destroy the Republicans in place and then split the Democrats into two factions. Well, that New Deal faction of the Democratic Party is really pretty small.
They're wimps. The New Deal faction of the Democratic Party are just a couple of wimps.
You got some people who are pretty good, like Sherrod Brown, or God, he's like the only one that would come to mind. There are good aspects to people like Elizabeth Warren and stuff. They could certainly all be part of a coalition, but we need like real leaders in place.
I don't even want to say that because everybody will get behind an Elizabeth Warren. Oh, it's so depressing when I think about her.
Yeah.
Oh, God, there's not much meat there.
Just get ready for some capitulation and some angry apologies.
But you said perfectly, it's been 13 years since 9/11. If we had just been spending that time in service to a program that would end the economic depression, we could have really gotten somewhere, could have avoided 2008 and the crash and everything.
We've lost a whole generation.
We've lost a whole generation. My entire life since my youth. It took me all this time to figure it out. And I wonder, when you feel something, the rest of the world feels it.
Mm-hmm.
That if everybody out there is sick of losing and sick of not having the right solutions. I just say, if I'm feeling it, somebody else is feeling it. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I think it's the same idea where in the Roosevelt's first campaign was all based on this idea of the forgotten man. Where it's just basically the average American, I think right now, is feeling deeply disillusioned and disenfranchised and just doesn't know what to do.
I think they're super angry, Kyle. When I was out on the street, people were telling me that any day now they were ready to pick up arms. That's where it's at, Kyle. People are angry, and it's like, hey, well, guys, before you do that, why don't you take a look at this program? And it took me a while to explain it to them, but when they got it, they really got it. If you have a good program, it's timeless, like the one that's written down at the Tax Wall Street Party United Front Against Austerity, it's only a matter of changing one person's mind at a time. And once they get something that's timeless, they won't be changed back by mythologies. Doing this work means you're not losing because it's something that's survived throughout history. The other stuff never worked. Libertarianism never worked anywhere. The other stuff out on the table has never worked. The other economic system. So it's kind of just like, okay, you change one person's mind. As soon as you see them get it, I always get that thing like, well, what if this doesn't work? And I always tell people it's already worked. It's like that. There's that story of the kid who was walking on the beach with his father. Millions of starfish washed up on the beach. And the kid was throwing one starfish at a time back into the ocean. And the father said, what are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? There's millions of them. And he goes, you're not going to be able to save them. And he goes, well, I just saved that one. I feel like one person gets something that's timeless. It's the only way. We could sit and talk forever about how the elite have more information than we do. They have better schools and they have all this stuff. But if you can synthesize what works down into a small package and hand deliver it to the people who didn't have that privilege, then you've done a service.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to keep being entertained until you realize that the information you're getting is bad. As soon as you realize the information you're getting is bad, you won't even want to keep listening. It won't be entertaining anymore.
And anybody that thinks that a violent insurrection is an option needs to really maybe like just go to Wikipedia and look up Patriot missile. It's meaning like, look at the arms that the government, meaning like the U.S. military, has the capability of wielding against you. And people think we're in the time of muskets or something. People want to refer back to the American Revolution. It's like, how about the Civil War? Look at what happened to the South, who started a war for the stupidest possible thing in the world. A bunch of guys who didn't own slaves started a war so that the rich oligarchs who lived near them could have slaves. And a superior, military machine wiped them out, and the place has never totally recovered.
Well, people are this discombobulated. They think it's a quicker solution to start a revolution, an armed insurrection, than it is to try a program. That, to them, just seems too complicated and gets them frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
I have to learn, what these 5 economic points that are going to solve the entire American economic crisis and give us all back our jobs and all back our standard of living and keep Congress in check by keeping Wall Street in check. I've got to figure that out. I'm just going to get a gun. Like, you're going to, like,
Yeah.
That's the level of resistance. And that's the resistance that somebody like an Alex Jones, Rush Limbaugh, or Glenn Beck, or a Mark Levin play on. They keep knowledge away from them, or else they don't know the knowledge themselves. Whatever the answer is, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't even know it themselves.
Wall Street is like a cancer that metastasizes throughout history. It's never going to go away because all Wall Street is people trying to get rich without working. They want to. Lincoln said, he said of the slave owners, but they want to wipe their daily bread from the sweat of other men's brows. That's really all it is. And so it's we talked about, where does evil come from? Is it like a supernatural thing, or is it just part of, human capacity? Whatever the answer is, it's going to keep happening. Well, the desire to rob people is never going to be wiped out of the human race entirely. But what you can do is shore up your immune system against it, And what is the immune system? Is the government. And so you want your immune system to basically create the right antibodies against Wall Street. Wall Street wants to use free trade to make money on cheap foreign labor. Well, then you need the antibody of a tax on that labor so that it can't get into your system. They want to basically, they want to practice usury and charge you twice as much as your house is worth to buy your house. Well, then we need the immune response of public credit to allow people to not have to deal with that. You need practical responses with government action to make sure that that Wall Street has no foothold in the system.
I have anarchists setting off bottle rockets outside my door.
They're laying siege.
I feel like we're in the Revolutionary War. They're setting off bottle firecrackers. Sorry. Our immune system is the government. You want to strengthen the government against the influence of Wall Street.
And strengthen it in the right way, meaning with economic demands, not with just like dictatorial control or something.
From both sides, we're getting hammered, right? We need smaller government, while Wall Street is this cancer metastasizing and growing bigger. That's crazy. And we're all listening to it. Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's basically, it's like saying, what, you've got lung cancer? All right, here's a knife, stab yourself in the lungs. Well, that's not going to help. And maybe you'll hit all the cancer and hopefully you don't bleed to death. If we want to appeal to libertarians, or, all right, let's do radical chemotherapy. We're going to kill off the entire immune system and hope that the cancer dies before you do. Libertarianism would be akin to radical chemotherapy when there is some holistic cure available. And the holistic cure is to strengthen the immune system. But to do that, unfortunately, we're going to need, go on a radical information diet and get the right kind of exercise and stop eating junk food. And
there's been some good stuff that's come out through 9/11 research and all this stuff, but what did that even amount to? I mean, we all found out that 9/11 was an inside job. We don't know who did it. We don't know if it was the government or the banks or who the hell did it, right? Or some shadow government. Mm-hmm. We don't know who did it, but who's going to get the blame for that? The government. Now Wall Street grows stronger from that. From all of this stuff, just ask yourself, with this information, is Wall Street growing stronger? Remember, tonight is Christmas, and Reverend Pinkney is spending that time alone in prison in Jackson, Michigan. Getting a Christmas card is huge. Write long-winded letters to Edward Pinkney. Then you're going to put his inmate number, which is #hashtag 294671. 294671. The next line down, G. Roberts, ROBERTS, Cotton, COTTON, Reception Center. Next line, 3855 Cooper Street, COOPER Street. Next line, Jackson, Michigan, JACKSON, Michigan, 49201. He's feeling a little disoriented spending this time alone, and he'd like nothing more than to hear from you on this Christmas. And if you're hearing this after Christmas, you can send a priority mail 3 days, and he'll get it soon enough. And we will have this address at the website freepinkney.wordpress.com. Let's close the show on this week's Pinkney update from me on Webster Tarpley's World Crisis Radio. Have a blessed evening.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to men of good will. While we're waiting to see if we can bring on Reverend Pinkney, I would suggest that we now get a report from Daniela Walls. She is, of course, the chairperson of the Tax Wall Street Party, and she has been one of the leading forces in the defense of Pinkney, his political defense and also his legal defense. So I think we should probably go to Daniela now and get a report about what's going on all of those fronts, right? Remember, Daniela, people have not heard from us on this program since last Friday, so a whole lot has happened in the meantime.
Okay, so I'll try to be thorough. As for getting through to Pinkney, media was able to get through in the last 24 hours, but I've heard that it's getting tougher. Keep pushing. You have the number to get through to Pinkney, but he told me that he absolutely wants to be on the show and tell everybody what's happening, but instead I'm going to speak for him today, and if you can get through to him, that's great, but he definitely is going to be on next week. I have ways to work on how we can get that done. So Pinkney was sentenced this Monday, December 15th, to 2.5 to 10 years. He was immediately handcuffed on Monday morning and taken out of court and is currently sitting in the Jackson State Prison, 2 hours away from his wife Dorothy and legal counsel. He was supposed to be in the local jail, Webster, near the court for at least a period where he had easy access to counsel and family until the judge and the prosecution had time to review and respond to the motions that we filed in our sentencing brief. Pinkney was not legally allowed to be transported away from counsel until the judge and the prosecutor responded to the mandatory sentencing brief, if that makes sense. You're supposed to write a sentencing brief before you're given the sentence. The judge didn't read the sentencing brief. He was supposed to respond to the brief before making any sentence, but he simply said in court the prosecution didn't have time to read your brief. They legally have to read the brief and respond before making any sentence. Outside counsel from other states can't believe what's happening. The brief stated was that the juror, Gail Freeling, was not only friends but a work colleague with both Sharon Tyler on the prosecution and Sheriff Paul Bailey. Gail Freeling was asked explicitly under oath if she knew either Clerk Sharon Tyler or Sheriff Paul Bailey. Those were the two key people. Under oath, Gail Freeling said no. That is not true. We worked with Pinkney to expose the fact that Gail Freeling, the lying juror in this case, lied under oath about her personal connections to these key individuals. This proved that we had a packed jury. The motion that the jury was packed was presented as part of Pinkney's sentencing brief that by law they had to respond to. So this motion was filed before the deadline. This is important because the judge agreed to a deadline with us. And he said, we all know that I have to respond to your sentencing brief before sentencing you. That means the prosecution, this Mike Sepik, would have to come up with an argument in court why the sentencing brief we presented was meaningless if that was their decision. He would have to make a list of arguments. So this motion was filed before the deadline. So the judge, the prosecutor, and our legal team agreed on a date. We filed well before the deadline. And his argument in court, in quotes, was the prosecution didn't have time to read or respond to it. That is illegal. We agreed to a deadline. We were before it. He says we didn't have time to read it. They have to respond. So, in fact, right now they are responding, Webster. That's why it's important that we keep up the international media pressure and the national media pressure. This is no time to go soft. They should have had Pinkney in the local jail so he could talk to his lawyer right near the courthouse while they responded to the sentencing brief, and then they could overturn the sentencing, give a new trial, throw it out. There's a myriad of things that can still happen. Instead, what they did was they sent Pinkney 2 hours away to a prison. First, it was a place called quarantine, which is similar to a solitary confinement, but outside counsel called the lawyer and told him that was highly illegal, that he couldn't consult with counsel. because you never know what goes on behind closed doors, why they allowed him to start talking to the media and to counsel, but I think that might have been why. Keep up the pressure. So the judge and the prosecutor, Mike Sepik, know that they have to respond, and they are responding, and this could mean that they can throw out the sentence, like I said, or give a retrial. Pinkney is 66 years old, and so a 2.5 to 10-year sentence is a lot of time. The reason for this large range of time is to send a message. This is all about sending a message. All of this, from the beginning, has been about sending a message to the community to be afraid and to Pinkney to be afraid. And the message is that we'll give you 2.5 years at 66 years old if you shut your mouth and you don't protest from prison. If you don't shut your mouth and keep protesting, it's going to be 10. And Reverend Pinkney begged me, he said, I want you to tell the world, Daniela. He calls me Danielle. He doesn't do the A, but he goes, Danielle, you tell the world. Do not give in to their fear tactics. Do not stop anything. We are fighting a larger war to tax Whirlpool, which pays no taxes to the city or federal income tax while the community suffers in Benton Harbor. The larger war he speaks about is to restore democracy and racial justice to Michigan cities and free trade, bring back American manufacturing, jobs, etc. So he said, do not give in to their fear tactics. Benton Harbor is in worse shape, but Benton Harbor is a microcosm, make no mistake about it, of America and what America is going to look like if we don't fight back now. This is the fight. It's a vision of things to come. Benton Harbor is Pottersville from It's a Wonderful Life. Every one of those metaphors, Reverend Pinkney is fighting for democracy in a company town. I'd like to thank some of the activists because there's a lot that they did to reduce what could have possibly happened. Don't think you didn't help. They're trying to create propaganda as if the activists are crazy liberals or don't know what's going on. They're trying to paint a picture. We had over 100 letters flood into the judge from around the country and 10 different nations. He says over 100. We don't know the number. That could be 167. That could be 190. We don't know what he means by that. But Judge Chirac made a big deal of these letters in local press coverage and in the news. Every news show he's on, mainstream news, he says, I got over 100 letters. But he has to find a way to put them down, right, Webster? So he says they came from outside of Benton Harbor. So this is just a tactic to say that nobody in the community is on Reverend Pinkney's side. But the truth is that everybody in southwest Michigan in Benton Harbor is afraid. They have been victims for decades of institutional racism, poverty, harassment by the Whirlpool Corporation's henchmen like Judge Chirac, and Pinkney is the last person that's standing up. So that's what's going on. He had 50 or more people outside the courtroom. Dorothy reported to me that the court room was packed, and outside the courtroom on the street, or the courthouse, on the street, there were over 50. But here's what's going on. Pinkney has enemies in high places. Do not underestimate how high this goes. The corruption goes up to the highest levels of government and corporate collusion. We've had a hit piece written by the Heritage Foundation the other day, Webster. The Heritage Foundation itself wrote a hit piece saying Pinkney is guilty of election fraud. And it says these crazy liberal activists are coming to his defense. Pinkney was no crazy liberal, Democrat, Republican. He was fighting for justice. This article was clearly written by somebody which interested me.
Well, we know, Danielle, I went through, Hans von Spakovsky is a well-known hack. He's been on C-SPAN. He's all over the place. Thank you very much. I think we've covered the waterfront. So we'll see you again next week, huh? And we'll try to get some good news.